My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a commercial deep-sea welder working out of Port Arthur, Texas, and I've been doing saturation diving in the Gulf of Mexico for 19 years. What I'm about to tell you happened between March and September of last year, and it's the reason I haven't been below 200 feet since. If you're from the Gulf Coast, especially if you work offshore, you need to hear this. It could save your life. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button if you're interested in true horror stories from people who work in the dark places most folks never see. And drop a comment if you've ever experienced something you can't explain while working offshore. Now, let me tell you about what we found at the Perdido Deep Site and why 3 men are dead because something down there learned our names. I need you to understand something about saturation diving before we go further. When you're working on deep water rigs and pipelines, you can't just drop down, do your welding, and come back up. The pressure would kill you. Instead, they compress you slowly in a chamber on the surface. Then you live in that pressurized environment for weeks at a time. When you need to work, they send you down in a diving bell, basically a reinforced pod, and you spend hours in total darkness at depths where the pressure would crush a car like a beer can. The water temperature hovers around 40 degrees. You can't see more than 3 feet in front of your face, even with floodlights. And the silence is absolute, except for your own breathing and the occasional groan of metal or pipeline. Most people think the ocean floor is empty, desert-like. They're wrong. There's life down there, strange life, things that have adapted to conditions that would kill surface creatures in seconds. I've seen fish with teeth like needles and bodies so transparent you can see their organs. I've watched bioluminescent creatures drift past like ghosts. After 19 years, I thought I'd seen everything the deep could throw at me. I was wrong. The Perdido Deep Site is located about 200 miles south of the Texas-Louisiana border, in waters exceeding 9,000 feet. We were contracted to do structural repairs and welding on a subsea manifold system, essentially the equipment that controls oil and gas flow from multiple wells. The client was Helix Energy, and the job was supposed to take 6 weeks. Standard stuff. My dive partner was a guy named Tom Cassidy, 41, from Biloxi, with 15 years of experience. Good man, steady hands, the kind of partner you trust with your life because you have to. We started the job on March 15th. The compression took 30 hours, gradually increasing the pressure in our living chamber to match the depth we'd be working. By March 17th, Tom and I were ready for our first dive. The dive supervisor was a woman named Rachel Cohn, 10 years in the job, meticulous about safety protocols. She ran us through the checklist 3 times before authorizing our descent. The diving bell dropped through the darkness like a coffin on a cable. You feel it in your bones, that descent. The weight of all that water pressing down. Tom and I sat across from each other in the cramped sphere, our umbilicals coiled beside us. Those were our lifelines, feeding us breathing gas and hot water to keep our suits from freezing. Neither of us spoke during the descent. There was nothing to say. We'd done this hundreds of times. At 800 feet, Tom's floodlight caught something in the water. Just a flash. He tapped my shoulder and pointed, but whatever it was had already disappeared into the black. I figured it was a fish, some kind of deep-sea species drawn by our lights. We reached the worksite at 920 feet. The manifold was a massive structure of pipes, valves, and pressure housings, all coated in marine growth and sediment. Our job was to repair stress fractures in several junction welds. I can still remember the first time I touched the manifold that day. The metal was cold, even through my insulated gloves. and when I brushed away some of the growth, I saw something that made me pause. Scratches, deep ones, running in parallel lines across the steel surface. "Tom, you seeing this?" I said into my comm. "Yeah, what the hell makes marks like that?" The scratches were too regular to be random corrosion or damage from debris. They looked deliberate, carved. I ran my gloved hand across them and felt the grooves, at least a quarter-inch deep in steel that was 3 inches thick. "Could be from installation equipment," Rachel's voice crackled in our helmets. "Focus on the welds, guys. You've got 4 hours of bottom time." We got to work. Welding underwater isn't like surface welding. You're using specialized rods and techniques, working in slow motion because of the pressure and the thick gloves. Every movement has to be precise. I was 40 minutes into my first weld when I heard it. A sound. Not through the water. Sound travels differently down there, muffled and distorted. This was through the metal itself. A resonance. Like someone dragging something heavy across the manifold structure, metal on metal, but slow, rhythmic. I stopped welding. "Tom, you hear that?" "Yeah, probably thermal contraction. This thing's been down here for years." But it didn't sound like thermal contraction. It sounded deliberate. And it was getting closer. I turned slowly, sweeping my floodlight across the manifold. The beam cut through the murk, illuminating swirling sediment and the occasional flash of some deep-sea creature fleeing the light. Nothing else. Just darkness beyond the reach of my lamp. The sound stopped. "Just the metal settling," Tom said, but I heard the uncertainty in his voice. We finished the weld and moved to the next site. My light caught something else as we repositioned. Another set of those scratches, fresh ones, cutting through the marine growth. These hadn't been there during our pre-dive inspection photos. I was certain of it. "Rachel, we're seeing some unusual markings on the structure. Might want to document this for the client." "Copy that. Get some photos when you can." I pulled out the underwater camera and started taking pictures. As I moved around the manifold, I found more scratches. Dozens of them. All parallel. All deep. All following the same pattern, like something with claws had systematically worked its way around the entire structure. That's when Tom screamed. What Tom saw in the darkness would haunt me for months, but it was nothing compared to what we'd find on the next dive. "Tom, report!" Rachel's voice cut through the comm, sharp and urgent. I spun around, my light sweeping across the manifold. Tom was pressed against the structure, his back to the metal, his light pointed down into the darkness below the manifold. His breathing was rapid, panicked. I could hear it through the comm, the ragged gasps of a man trying not to lose control. "Something just... Jesus Christ, Marcus! Something just swam under the manifold! It was huge! It was..." "Calm down," I said, moving toward him as quickly as the pressure would allow. Everything happens in slow motion at 900 feet. "What did you see?" "I don't know. It was big, really big. And it didn't move like a fish. It moved like it was thinking. It circled under there, and then it just stopped. It's still down there. I can feel it watching." I reached Tom's position and pointed my light down into the gap beneath the manifold. The structure was mounted on support columns, creating a space of maybe 10 feet between the equipment and the sea floor. My light penetrated about 6 feet before the water simply swallowed the beam. I saw sediment stirring down there, disturbed by something that had recently passed through. I don't see anything, I said. It was there. I swear to God it was there. Both of you, return to the bell, Rachel ordered. We're aborting this dive. Neither of us argued. We made our way back to the diving bell, constantly checking over our shoulders. The ascent took 30 minutes. The entire time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was below us, following us up through the water column, staying just outside the reach of our lights. Back in the living chamber, after we'd disconnected from the bell and the pressure had equalized, Tom finally relaxed enough to talk about it properly. We were alone. The chamber was a cylindrical pod about 8 feet in diameter and 12 feet long, with bunks, a small toilet, and basic supplies. We'd be living in this pressurized environment for the next month. I've been diving for 15 years, Tom said, staring at his hands. I've seen a lot of weird shit down there, but I've never seen anything that made me feel like that. Like what? Like prey. He described it as best he could. Something large, he estimated 20 feet long, maybe more, with a body shape he couldn't quite make out. It had moved with a sinuous motion, almost serpentine, but there were appendages. Multiple appendages, and eyes. He was certain he'd seen eyes, large and reflective, catching his light for just a moment before the thing had stopped moving and simply hovered there beneath the manifold. You think it was a shark? I asked, though I knew it wasn't. No, sharks move different. This thing moved like it had joints in places it shouldn't, like it was all wrong. Rachel's voice came through the chamber's speaker. How are you two doing in there? Fine, I said. Tom's good. We're good. I've been looking at the camera footage. Marcus, I need you to check something. Loading the images to your tablet now. The tablet mounted on our chamber wall flickered to life. The photos I'd taken of the scratches appeared on screen. Rachel had enhanced them, increasing the contrast and clarity. What I saw made my mouth go dry. The scratches weren't random. They formed patterns. Letters. Not English letters. Something older. I recognized a few symbols from a tattoo my grandfather had. He'd been a fisherman his whole life, worked the Gulf from Galveston to Florida. He'd told me once that the old fishermen, the ones from generations back, had their own symbols. Protection marks, ways of warding off what lived in the deep places. What am I looking at? Rachel asked. I don't know, I lied. Because even though I didn't understand the symbols, I understood their purpose. These were warnings. Someone, or something, had carved warnings into the manifold structure. We tried to sleep that night, but sleep in a saturation chamber is never peaceful. You're breathing heliox, a mixture of helium and oxygen, which makes your voice sound like you've inhaled from a party balloon, but also makes you perpetually cold. The pressure affects your sleep cycles. You drift in and out of consciousness, never quite reaching deep sleep. And that night, I kept hearing sounds through the chamber walls. Tapping. Rhythmic. Like something was outside, moving around the chamber, testing it. Tom heard it too. I could tell by the way he was lying rigid in his bunk, pretending to sleep. At 0400 hours, the tapping stopped. I finally dozed off around 0500. Rachel woke us at 0800. We've got a problem. The client wants to know why we aborted yesterday's dive. I need to give them something. Tell them we had an equipment malfunction, Tom said. I can't lie on a dive report, you know that. If something goes wrong and they find out I falsified records. Then tell them we saw something biological that spooked us, I said. Giant squid, maybe. They're documented in these waters. Did it look like a squid? Rachel asked. I don't know what it looked like, Tom admitted. Rachel was silent for a moment. Then, okay, I'll report a possible large marine animal in the work area, but we need to continue the job. We're 3 days in on a 6-week contract. The client's not going to accept us shutting down over a fish. It wasn't a fish, Tom said. Then what was it? Neither of us had an answer. Our next dive was scheduled for 1,400 hours. I spent the morning reviewing the enhanced photos, trying to make sense of the symbols. I pulled up everything I could in the chamber's limited internet connection. Articles about Gulf Coast folklore, historical accounts from fishermen, even some academic papers about pre-Columbian maritime cultures. One name kept appearing, the Karankawa people, an indigenous tribe that had lived along the Texas coast for thousands of years before they were wiped out in the 1850s. The Karankawa had been mariners, expert fishermen. They'd had stories about things that lived in the deep water, entities they called the name-takers. According to the fragmented accounts I found, the name-takers were creatures that dwelled in the darkest parts of the Gulf, and they had one particular trait that made them terrifying. They learned the names of anyone who entered their territory, and once they knew your name, they owned a piece of your soul. The accounts describe people disappearing from boats, fishermen who went out and never came back, others who returned, changed, marked somehow, unable to stop hearing their names whispered in the wind and waves until they eventually walked into the ocean and didn't come back. Superstition, it had to be, but those symbols on the manifold. At 13:45 hours, Tom and I suited up for the second dive. His hands were shaking. You okay? I asked. No, but we've got a job to do. The descent was quiet. Neither of us spoke until we reached the work site. Everything looked the same, the manifold looming in our lights, pipes and valves disappearing into darkness, marine life scattering from our presence. Except for one thing, the scratches. There were more of them now, fresh ones, and they'd been arranged into a new pattern directly on the area where we were supposed to work. The new scratches spelled out something that made my blood run cold, and they hadn't been there 8 hours ago. I moved closer to the new scratches, my light illuminating the fresh marks in the steel. The edges were sharp, not yet colonized by marine growth. Whatever had made them had done so recently. Very recently. Rachel, we've got new markings on the structure, I reported. They weren't in the inspection photos from yesterday. How is that possible? The site's been undisturbed. I'm telling you, they weren't here. I pulled out the camera and started documenting. Tom kept his lights sweeping the perimeter, watching the darkness. I could hear his breathing, faster than it should be. Mine wasn't much better. The new symbols formed a pattern I recognized from my research that morning. 3 parallel lines, crossed by a 4th, with a circular mark above them. In the Karankawa accounts I'd found, that particular symbol meant known or named. It was a marker, a claim. Marcus? Tom's voice was tight. Marcus, there's something on the seafloor, about 20 feet out. It's not moving. I turned. His light was pointed down at an angle, illuminating the silt-covered bottom. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my brain processed what I was looking at, and I felt ice flood my veins despite the hot water running through my suit. It was a helmet. A diving helmet. Old style, brass with glass viewing ports. The kind they used in the 80s and early 90s before modern systems. It was just sitting there, half buried in sediment, the glass ports dark and empty. That's not from our company, Tom said. No, that's at least 30 years old. Should we check it out? Every instinct I had screamed no. But we were professionals. We had to investigate. Yeah, let's take a look. We made our way down to the seafloor, our fins stirring up clouds of silt. As we got closer, I saw that the helmet wasn't alone. There were other pieces of equipment scattered around it. A knife, corroded but still recognizable, part of a weight belt, and something that looked like bone, though I told myself it was just a piece of coral or calcified debris. Tom reached the helmet first. He knelt down and brushed away some of the sediment. "Marcus, there's a nameplate." I moved beside him. Riveted to the helmet's collar was a small brass plate, tarnished green but still legible. James Petrie, Gulf Industrial Diving, 1989. "We need to report this," I said. "This is a recovery situation." "Marcus, look." Tom had cleared more sediment. Next to the helmet was a skull. Human. Unmistakable. And on the forehead of the skull, scratched into the bone itself, was that same symbol I'd seen on the manifold. The named marker. "Oh, Jesus," Tom whispered. "Oh, Jesus Christ." "Both of you, get back to the bell now," Rachel ordered. She'd been watching through our camera feeds. "We're not equipped for a recovery operation. I need to contact the Coast Guard and—" The sound came again. That metal-on-metal resonance, but louder now, closer. It was coming from somewhere beneath the manifold, from that dark space where Tom had seen the creature yesterday. "Rachel, we're coming up," I said, already turning back toward the manifold where we'd left the bell. That's when our lights started failing. Not both at once. Tom's went first, flickering once, twice, then dying completely. The darkness rushed in like a living thing. My light was all we had now, and it seemed pathetically small against the crushing blackness. "Emergency protocol," Rachel said, her voice professionally calm despite the crisis. "Tom, activate your backup light. Marcus, stay close to him." Tom fumbled with his backup. I heard him breathing hard, muttering something that might have been a prayer. My light caught movement in the corner of my vision, something large sliding across the manifold structure above us. "Tom, light, now!" His backup flared to life. The beam was weaker than the primary, but it was something. We both turned our lights upward toward where I'd seen the movement. Nothing. Just the manifold and empty water. "Let's move," I said. We headed for the bell, moving as fast as the pressure would allow. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every piece of drifting sediment became something sinuous and hunting. We were 20 feet from the bell when my light caught something that made me stop dead. There was a figure standing on top of the manifold, human-shaped, wearing an old-style diving suit. Just standing there, motionless, facing us. The helmet's viewing ports were dark, empty. "Tom, do you see that?" "I see it." "Rachel, there's someone on the manifold. Another diver." "That's impossible. We're the only crew on site. You're seeing things. Get to the bell." But I wasn't seeing things. It was there, solid, real. And as we watched, it raised one arm and pointed at us. A slow, deliberate motion. Then it stepped backward and vanished into the darkness behind the manifold. We didn't wait to see if it reappeared. We scrambled into the bell, sealed the hatch, and signaled for immediate ascent. The ride up felt like it took hours instead of 30 minutes. Neither Tom nor I spoke. We just sat there, pressed against opposite sides of the bell, listening to our own breathing and the groan of the cable pulling us toward the surface. Back in the living chamber, Rachel was waiting on the comm.
I've reviewed the footage. I don't know what to tell you. There was definitely something there. Something shaped like a person. But there are no other dive teams within 300 miles of this site.
It wasn't a person, Tom said quietly. Did you see the way it moved? The way it just appeared? That wasn't a person.
Then what was it?
I pulled up the photos of James Petrie's helmet on the tablet. Rachel, I need you to research something for me. Gulf Industrial Diving, 1989. Find out what happened to them. Find out what happened to James Petrie. It took her 3 hours. When she finally responded, her voice had changed. The professional calm was gone, replaced by something tight and worried.
I found it, she said. Gulf Industrial Diving was a contractor based out of Louisiana. In August of 1989, they were working a deep water site about 12 miles from your current position. 3 divers, James Petrie, Michael Kowalski, and David Tran. All 3 disappeared during a routine dive. The diving bell came back up empty. The tender said he'd been in communication with them 1 minute, and the next, all 3 had disconnected their umbilicals and just left. They found Petrie's helmet 3 weeks later during a side-scan sonar survey. The other 2 were never recovered. What was the official cause?
Nitrogen narcosis, pressure psychosis. They said all 3 divers suffered simultaneous psychological breaks and abandoned their equipment. But Marcus, I found something else. There were 4 other incidents at that same site over the next 2 years. Different companies. Same thing. Divers disappearing or coming back. Changed. Eventually, the site was abandoned. Too many accidents. Too many unexplained incidents.
What site was it?
I asked, though part of me already knew. The Perdido Deep Site. Marcus, you're working the same manifold system. They just moved some equipment around and gave it a new name, but it's the same place. Tom and I looked at each other in the cramped chamber. The same place. The place where divers had been disappearing for 35 years. Why wasn't this in our briefing? Tom demanded. Because officially those incidents never happened. The companies involved sealed the records. NDAs, settlement payments, the whole thing. It's buried. I thought about those symbols scratched into the manifold, warnings, and I thought about that figure standing above us, pointing, not threatening, warning. Rachel, we need to shut this job down.
I agree. I'm contacting the client now. We'll start decompression tomorrow and…
The chamber's lights went out. All of them. Complete darkness. The kind of darkness that makes you question whether you still have eyes. Tom gasped. I heard him fumbling for something, anything, in the blackness. Emergency lights should have kicked in immediately. They didn't. Then, in that absolute darkness, I heard something that made my skin crawl. A voice. Distant. Distorted by the pressure and the helium in our atmosphere, but unmistakable. It was calling my name.
Marcus.
Tom heard it too.
What the fuck? What the fuck is that?
Marcus Webb. It knew my full name, and it was coming from outside the chamber. The voice knew things about me it shouldn't, things only the dead would remember. The emergency lights finally flickered on, bathing the chamber in weak red light. Tom and I were pressed against opposite walls, our eyes wide, still hearing that voice echo in our minds. Rachel, I said into the comm. Rachel, do you copy? Static. Then her voice, shaken but present.
I'm here. What the hell just happened? All your systems went dark for 45 seconds. Life support, communications, everything.
We heard something, Tom said. A voice. It said Marcus's name.
That's impossible. Sound can't penetrate the chamber walls.
I know what I heard, I snapped. Then, forcing myself to calm down, Rachel, how fast can we decompress?
Standard protocol is 3 days for the depth and duration you've been under. I can maybe push it to 2 days if we accept some risk, but…
Do it. We need to get out of here.
Marcus, if we decompress too fast, you could get the bends. You could die.
Better than staying here. There was a long pause. Then,
okay, I'll start the process. But if anything feels wrong, pain, numbness, anything, you tell me immediately.
The decompression process began at 1800 hours. Slowly, incrementally, the pressure in our chamber began to decrease. Tom and I didn't talk much. We just sat there, listening, waiting. The tapping sounds had returned, circling the chamber like something was doing a methodical patrol. At 2200 hours, my tablet chimed. A message from Rachel. Found something else. You need to see this. A document appeared on screen. A police report from Galveston, Texas, dated October 1989. A fisherman named Robert Webb, my grandfather, had filed a missing persons report for his diving partner, a man named Vincent Torres. According to the report, Torres had gone for a routine spearfishing dive near the Flower Garden banks, about 100 miles offshore. He descended to 200 feet and never came back up. His body was found 3 days later, washed up on a beach near Port Arthur. The report included photographs. I almost didn't look, but I had to. Vincent Torres's body was intact. No signs of drowning, no signs of trauma, but his forehead bore a mark, a symbol, carved into the skin, the same named symbol I'd seen on James Petrie's skull and on the manifold. My grandfather had known about this. He'd seen it firsthand, and he'd never told me. Or had he? I remembered something from when I was a kid, maybe 12 years old. Grandpa had taken me fishing, just the two of us, out in the Gulf. He'd been quiet that day, staring at the water like he was looking for something. Finally, he'd said, "Marcus, if you ever work these waters, you remember something. There are things down deep that were here long before us. They have rules. You respect those rules, you might be okay. You break them." He'd trailed off, shaking his head. "Just don't go deeper than you have to. And don't ever tell the deep your name." At the time, I'd thought he was being superstitious, old fisherman talk. Now I understood. He'd been trying to warn me. "Tom," I said, "did you tell anyone your name while we were down there?" "What? Of course not. Who would I tell?" "Did you say it out loud? Think carefully. Before we saw that thing, did you say your name for any reason?" He thought about it. "No, I don't… Wait. When we first got to the manifold, on that first dive, I was testing my comm. I said, 'Tom Cassidy, checking in.' Standard radio procedure." My blood went cold. I'd done the same thing. "Marcus Webb, comm check." We'd both announced our full names at the worksite. We'd told the deep exactly who we were. "Why?" Tom asked. "What does it matter?" Before I could answer, the lights went out again. This time, the voice was closer, right outside the chamber wall. "Tom Cassidy." Tom made a sound I'd never heard from him before. A whimper. Pure terror. "Leave us alone," he shouted. "We're leaving. We're decompressing. Just leave us alone." The tapping intensified. Multiple sources now, all around the chamber, like dozens of fingers drumming against the metal hull, creating rhythms, patterns. They were tapping out our names in Morse code. I knew Morse code. It was part of my Navy training before I'd gone into commercial diving, and what I heard was unmistakable. MARCUSTOM. Over and over. Different sources taking turns, creating a chorus of our names in the darkness. "Rachel!" I screamed into the comm. "Rachel, we need emergency ascent, now!"
"I can't. The pressure differential will kill you. You've got another 36 hours minimum."
The emergency lights came back on. Tom was in the corner of the chamber, his hands over his ears, rocking back and forth. "Make it stop," he was saying. "Make it stop. Make it stop. Make it stop." I grabbed him by the shoulders. Tom, look at me. We're going to get through this. 2 more days. We can handle 2 more days." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Because I'd read those accounts about the name takers. I knew what happened to people they marked. The ones who made it back to shore, they didn't stay there long. The ocean called to them. Their names echoed in every wave, every drop of water. Eventually, they couldn't resist anymore. They walked back into the sea and were never seen again. Tom looked at me with hollow eyes. "It's not going to let us leave. You know that, right? It knows us now. It knows our names. We're marked. No, we're getting out of here, both of us." But that night, or what passed for night in the timeless space of the chamber, I had dreams. I was back at the manifold, but the water was gone. I could breathe. I could see clearly. And standing around the manifold were dozens of divers in old-style suits, all of them watching me. James Petrie was there, his face visible through his helmet's viewing port. He looked sad. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "This is their place. They collect us. They keep us." "Who are they?" I asked. Petrie pointed down into the darkness below the manifold. "The old ones. The name takers. They've been here since before people walked on land. This is their territory. And once they know you," he touched the symbol on his forehead, "you're theirs." "How do I stop it?" "You can't. You can only choose. Stay on land and hear your name in every drop of water until it drives you mad, or come back down here and join us. Either way, you belong to them now." I woke up gasping, my heart hammering. Tom was awake too, staring at the chamber ceiling. "I had the same dream," he said quietly. "The divers, Petrie, all of them. They're waiting for us down there." The next 30 hours were hell. We barely ate, barely spoke. The tapping continued intermittently, and twice more the lights failed. Each time, we heard our names called in that distorted, pressure-warped voice. Each time, it sounded closer. Rachel tried to keep us calm, talking to us constantly, but I could hear the fear in her voice. She'd pulled up more records, found more disappearances. The Perdido Deep Site had claimed 23 divers since 1984. Some had vanished like Petrie and his crew. Others had made it back to the surface but had walked off boats in the middle of the night, or disappeared from shore leave, or been found years later living near beaches, staring at the water, unable to explain why they couldn't leave. One name in particular caught my attention: Vincent Torres, my grandfather's partner. Except according to these records, Torres hadn't drowned. He'd completed his dive successfully. He'd come back to the surface, and then, 3 days later, he'd driven to the beach at 3 a.m. and walked into the Gulf. They'd found his truck with a note inside. "They're calling me. I have to go back.
They know my name. My grandfather had known. He'd seen what it did to Torres, and he'd tried to warn me in his own way. But I hadn't listened. Finally, after what felt like years, Rachel's voice came through the comm with the words we'd been desperate to hear. Decompression complete. You're at ambient pressure. Opening the outer hatch in 3, 2, 1. The hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Fresh air, real air, not heliox, rushed in. I could have cried. Tom and I climbed out of the chamber like we were escaping a tomb. The surface crew was waiting for us, concerned looks on their faces. Rachel was there too, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "You're okay," she said. "You're back. It's over." But it wasn't over. I knew that the moment my feet touched the deck, because I could hear it. Faint, just at the edge of perception, under the sound of the waves and the wind. My name, coming from the water. Tom heard it too. I saw it in his face. We made it back to shore, but I was wrong. Returning to land didn't mean we were safe. The company put us on mandatory medical leave, standard procedure after an emergency decompression, even though we showed no signs of decompression sickness. They flew us back to Port Arthur by helicopter.
I remember looking out the window during that flight, watching the Gulf spread out below us like hammered steel, and feeling like it was watching me back. Tom and I parted ways at the helipad. He was from Biloxi, a 6-hour drive east. Before he left, he gripped my arm hard enough to hurt. "If you hear it," he said, "if you hear your name, don't listen. Don't go near the water. Promise me." I promise. You too. But I was hearing it already. A whisper under the helicopter's rotors, a murmur in the wind. Marcus. Marcus Webb. I drove home to my apartment in Port Arthur, showered for the first time in 3 weeks, and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure standing on the manifold, pointing, warning or claiming, I still didn't know which. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and started researching. I needed to understand what we'd encountered. I needed to know if there was a way to break whatever connection had been forged between us and those things in the deep. I started with my grandfather's belongings. After he died 8 years ago, my mother had packed everything into boxes and stored them in her garage. I drove there at dawn, let myself in with my key, and started going through the containers marked Robert Webb, Personal. Most of it was what you'd expect: fishing gear, photos, logbooks from his years working the Gulf. But at the bottom of the 3rd box, I found a leather journal. Handwritten entries dating back to 1985. The pages were water-stained and brittle, but the writing was legible. What I read made me understand why my grandfather had tried so hard to keep me away from deep water. The entries started normally enough: fishing logs, weather conditions, catch reports. But in July of 1989, the tone changed. Grandpa and Vincent Torres had been hired to help with a salvage operation near the Flower Garden banks. They were support divers, staying shallow while the main crew worked at depth. The entry for July 15th read, "Vince and I pulled 3 bodies from the water today. Divers from Gulf Industrial. They'd been missing for 2 weeks. The company said they'd abandoned their equipment and drowned, but these men were experienced. They wouldn't just panic and leave their umbilicals. And the marks on their foreheads, I've seen those marks before. My father showed me when I was a boy. He said they were name marks, signs that something from the old waters had claimed a person. I didn't believe him then. I believe him now." Later entries described Torres's deterioration. After that salvage job, he'd started hearing things. His name in the wind, in the rain, in the water running from faucets. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. He was drawn constantly to the shore, standing for hours at the edge of the Gulf, just staring. On October 3rd, 1989, my grandfather wrote, "Vince went back. I tried to stop him. I took his keys, hid his diving gear, even called his wife to watch him. But at 3 a.m. he broke a window and left. They found his truck at the beach. He'd left a note. They're calling me. I have to go back. They know my name." I know where he went. He went back to the deep place, where the name takers live. I should have told him about them, should have warned him properly. But I thought if we didn't talk about it, it would go away. I was wrong. It never goes away. Once they know you, they own you. The final entry was dated October 10th, 1989. I spoke to a woman today, a folklorist from the University of Texas, Dr. Sarah Chen. She's been researching disappearances in the Gulf, trying to find patterns. I told her about Vince, about the marks. She said there are stories from the Karankawa people about entities that live in the deep waters, things that existed before humans. They collect names the way we collect shells. Each name gives them power, connection. She said there are ways to protect yourself, rituals, symbols. But once you're marked, once they've spoken your name, there's only one way out. The entry ended there, no explanation of what one way out meant. I photographed every page of the journal and then searched for Dr. Sarah Chen. It took me 3 hours, but I finally found her. She was now Dr. Sarah Chen Reeves, retired from UT Austin, living in Corpus Christi. I called her at 9 a.m., expecting voicemail. She answered on the second ring. "Dr. Chen Reeves? My name is Marcus Webb. My grandfather was—" "Robert Webb," she finished. Her voice was sharp, intelligent. "I remember him. Is he—" "He passed away 8 years ago." "I'm sorry. He was a good man. He tried to help his friend. Why are you calling me, Marcus?" I told her everything. The dive site, the symbols, the voice calling our names, the dreams. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. "You went to the Perdido site," she finally said. "Oh, Marcus, you shouldn't have done that." "I didn't know. Nobody told us." "They never do. The companies involved have spent millions suppressing the information. Too much money at stake. But that site, it's the worst of them. It's directly over what the Karankawa called the Deep House, a place where the boundary between our world and something else is thin. The name takers congregate there." "What are they?" "I don't know exactly. The Karankawa wouldn't speak their true name. They used metaphors. Old ones, those who came before. The collectors. Based on the accounts I've studied, they seem to be a form of ancient intelligence that exists in the deep ocean. They feed on consciousness, on identity. They collect names because names are power. Once they know your name, they have a piece of you, a hook they can use to pull you back." "Is there a way to break the connection?" Another long silence. "There's a reason your grandfather's journal ended where it did. The only documented cases of marked people breaking free involved extreme measures.
isolation from water sources, psychotropic medication. In some cases, the marked individual changed their identity completely. New name, new life, hoping the name takers wouldn't recognize them. Does that work? Sometimes, for a while. But the connection is deep, Marcus, neurological. Once they've spoken your name in that place, it's recorded in parts of your brain that don't respond to conscious thought. You'll hear it in your dreams, in moments of stress, near water. It fades over time for some people. For others, she trailed off. Others like Vincent Torres. Yes, I'm sorry. I wish I had better news. Dr. Chen Reeves, there's another man, Tom Cassidy. He was marked too. He's in Biloxi. Is there anything, any ritual or protection that might help us? Avoid the ocean. Avoid deep water entirely. Don't even take baths, showers only, and brief ones. The name takers can reach through any sufficient volume of water. And Marcus, if you start dreaming of going back, if you start feeling pulled toward the Gulf, you need to fight it with everything you have. Because if you go back down there, you won't come up again. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. I thought about Tom driving home to Biloxi. Biloxi was on the coast. He lived near the water. I called his number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times over the next hour. Nothing. At noon, I called Rachel. Have you heard from Tom? No, I've been trying to reach him about his medical evaluation. He's not answering. Rachel, I need his home address. I can't give out that information. You know that. Rachel, please, something's wrong. She was quiet for a moment. Then she gave me the address. I drove to Biloxi. 6 hours straight, breaking every speed limit. I kept the windows down the whole way because I couldn't stand running the AC. The moisture in the recycled air carried my name. Marcus, whispered in the wind, and the engine noise in my own breathing. Tom's apartment was in a complex 2 blocks from the beach. I could smell the Gulf from his parking lot. I knocked on his door. No answer. Tried calling again. His phone rang inside the apartment, but he didn't pick up. I picked the lock. I'm not proud of it, but I had to know. The apartment was empty. The lights were on. His keys were on the counter. His phone was on the kitchen table, surrounded by papers covered in frantic handwriting. The same symbol over and over. The named mark. Hundreds of them, covering every sheet. And on the table, a note. I can't hear anything else anymore. Just my name. Over and over. They want me to come back. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to fight it. Tell my sister, I'm sorry. I ran to the beach. I found Tom's diving gear on the sand, arranged neatly beside his boots, and fresh footprints leading into the surf. The footprints were clear in the wet sand, heading straight into the Gulf. The tide was coming in, waves already beginning to erase the trail. Tom's diving gear was arranged like he'd set it up for a ceremony. Mask, fins, and wetsuit laid out in a precise row. His boots were placed side by side, toes pointing toward the water. I ran along the beach, searching for any sign of him. Nothing. Just waves and empty shoreline. I called 911, reported a possible drowning. Within 20 minutes, the beach was crawling with Coast Guard personnel, local police, and emergency services. They searched for 3 days. Boats, divers, helicopters with thermal imaging. They found nothing. Tom Cassidy had walked into the Gulf of Mexico
and vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. I stayed in a Biloxi motel during the search, unable to leave, unable to help. The detective assigned to the case, a tired-looking woman named Ortega, interviewed me twice. I told her the truth. Tom and I had worked together on a dive job. He'd been stressed. I'd come to check on him and found him gone. I didn't tell her about the name takers, about the voice calling from the deep, about the mark that meant we were claimed. She would have thought I was insane. On the fourth day, I drove back to Port Arthur. I couldn't stay near the Gulf anymore. The pull was getting stronger. I could hear my name in every wave, feel something tugging at the base of my skull every time I looked at the water, like a fishhook lodged in my brain, and someone was gently pulling the line. I called Dr. Chen Reeves again. Tom went back. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was afraid of that. How are you holding up?" I can hear it. My name. All the time now. It's getting louder.
You need to get away from the coast. As far inland as you can go, the connection weakens with distance from the ocean.
What if that's not enough?
Then you have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice to stay free. I thought about my grandfather's journal, about that final entry. "One way out," he'd written. Dr. Chen Reeves had started to mention extreme measures. Changed identity. New name. "Dr. Chen Reeves, can you send me everything you have, all your research on the name takers, the Karankawa accounts, everything?"
Of course. But, Marcus, you should know. I've been studying this for 35 years, and I still don't fully understand what we're dealing with. These entities exist outside our normal frame of reference. They're not malicious in the way we think of it. They're collecting, preserving. In their own way, they're keeping the marked ones safe, eternal. The divers I've researched, the ones who went back, they're not dead exactly. They're maintained, changed, incorporated into something larger.
That's supposed to make me feel better?
No, it's supposed to help you understand what you're fighting. This isn't a predator hunting prey. It's more like gravity, a natural force. Once you're in its field, it's almost impossible to escape.
She sent the files that afternoon. Hundreds of pages. Academic papers, translated Karankawa oral histories, accounts from fishermen and divers going back 200 years. I spent a week reading everything, barely sleeping, living on coffee and growing paranoia. The patterns were clear. The name takers clustered around specific deep water sites throughout the Gulf, places where the seafloor dropped sharply into underwater canyons and trenches. The Perdido Deep site was one of the worst, but there were others. The Flower Garden Banks, the Mississippi Canyon, the Sigsbee Deep. All of them had histories of disappearances and strange incidents. The Karankawa had built their entire maritime culture around avoiding these places. They'd had strict rules. Never dive alone. Never go deeper than you could free dive in one breath. Never speak your name while on the water. And most importantly, never disturb the deep houses, the places where the name takers lived. But the Spanish had come, and then the Americans, and the old knowledge was lost. The oil companies started drilling in the deep waters. Divers started working at depths the Karankawa had known to avoid. And the name takers started collecting again. I found an account from 1923, a Navy diver named Christopher Lane who'd been working on a submarine salvage operation in the Gulf. He'd written a letter to his wife 3 days before he disappeared. "My darling Martha, something has happened to me.
I hear my name called in the water, not with my ears, in my mind. Christopher Lane, it says, over and over. I cannot sleep. I cannot think of anything else. The other men say I look ill. The doctor says it is pressure sickness, but I know better. I went too deep. I saw something down there, something that shouldn't exist, and now it knows me. It calls to me. I dream of returning to the water. I dream of going down and never coming up. I am trying to fight it, but I don't know how much longer I can hold out. If I go missing, tell the children their father loved them. Tell them I tried to stay. I tried. 3 days later, Christopher Lane dove off the salvage ship in the middle of the night, weighted down with 20 pounds of lead. They never recovered his body. The pattern repeated across decades. Different divers, different circumstances, but always the same progression. The dive to a deep sight, the marking, the voice calling their name, the inability to resist, and finally, the return to the deep. I was following the same path. Each day the voice got louder. I started having trouble distinguishing it from real sounds. Was that someone calling my name? Or was it the refrigerator humming? The rain on the windows? My own thoughts? I stopped showering, stopped drinking water unless absolutely necessary. I moved from Port Arthur to San Antonio, 200 miles inland. The distance helped, but not enough. I could still hear it, fainter but persistent. I contacted Rachel. I need everything from the dive site, all the footage, all the photos, everything you recorded. Marcus, are you okay? You sound... Just send me the files. She did. I spent 3 days going through every frame of video, every photograph, looking for something, any clue about how to break the connection. And I found it. In the footage from our last dive, just before Tom's light failed, the camera had caught something in the background. A figure. Not the one standing on the manifold. This was different, smaller, and it was holding something in its hands. I enhanced the image as much as I could. The figure was wearing an old diving suit, but through the helmet's viewing port, I could see a face. Preserved impossibly after decades underwater. The face was looking directly at the camera, and it was holding up a slate, the kind divers use for underwater communication. Written on the slate in clear letters, "Don't speak, don't answer. They only have what you give them." I stared at that image for hours. Don't answer. They only have what you give them. The name takers called our names. They used our voices, our identities, to pull us back. But what if we didn't answer? What if we didn't acknowledge the call? I spent the next month in San Antonio practicing. Every time I heard my name, Marcus Webb, I didn't react, didn't acknowledge it, didn't turn toward the sound. I meditated. I used every mental technique I could find. I imagined the voice passing through me like wind through a screen door. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every instinct screamed to respond, to acknowledge, to answer. But I didn't. Slowly, over weeks, the voice began to fade. Not gone. I knew it would never be completely gone, but quieter, more distant. I called Dr. Chen Reeves. I think I found something, a way to resist. Tell me. I explained the image, the message on the slate, my month of practice. She was silent for a long time. Marcus, you might have found it. The Karankawa stories mentioned something like this. They called it refusing the hook. The idea that the name takers can call you, but they can't force you to answer. The connection requires participation. If you don't give them that, they lose their hold. Maybe, gradually. But Marcus, you have to understand, you'll hear your name for the rest of your life. Every time you're near water, it'll get stronger. You can never go back to diving. Never go back to the Gulf. And you have to maintain that mental discipline forever. One moment of weakness, one time you answer, I know, but it's better than the alternative. It's been 14 months since the Perdido deep sat. I haven't been near the Gulf since San Antonio. I moved to Colorado, as far from the ocean as I can get in the lower 48. I work construction now, welding, but above ground, where I can see the sky. I still hear my name, especially when it rains, especially in my dreams. But I don't answer. I let it pass through me. Some days are easier than others. Tom Cassidy's body was never found. Neither were the bodies of the other 23 divers who disappeared at that site over the years. The Perdido deep sat is still operational. Helix Energy hired a new crew to finish the job. I hear they've had 3 more unexplained equipment failures and 1 medical evacuation for psychological distress. The company still hasn't disclosed the site's history to its contractors. But my story doesn't end in Colorado. I made one final dive to help someone escape, and what I brought back changed everything I thought I knew. I'd been in Colorado for 8 months when I got the call. Unknown number, Louisiana area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up.
Marcus Webb? A woman's voice. Young. Strained. Who is this?
My name is Diana Cassidy. I'm Tom's sister.
Everything inside me went cold.
I'm sorry about Tom. I tried to. I know. The police told me you were there. You tried to find him.
She paused.
Marcus, I need your help. Something's happening to me.
What do you mean?
I hear it. My name, Diana. Diana Cassidy. It's getting louder. And I never even went diving. I've never been deeper than a swimming pool. How is this possible?
I closed my eyes. Genetic connection. Families. The name takers had called Tom home, and now they were reaching for his sister through some sympathetic link I didn't understand. Where are you? I asked.
Biloxi. I can't leave. Every time I try to drive inland, I get this pain in my head, like something's pulling me back.
Diana, listen to me carefully. You need to.
I need you to come here. Please. The folklorist who talked to, Dr. Chen Reeves, she gave me your number. She said if anyone could help me, it's you. She said you found a way to resist.
Dr. Chen Reeves had no right to give out my information. I'd specifically asked her not to contact me again unless absolutely necessary. But looking at it from Diana's perspective, young woman, probably mid-20s, hearing impossible voices, her brother dead under mysterious circumstances, I understood the desperation. Diana, I can't come to the Gulf. If I get that close to the water,
then tell me what to do. Tell me how to make it stop.
I spent an hour on the phone with her, explaining everything. The name takers, the mental discipline, the technique of letting the voice pass through without acknowledging it. But even as I talked, I could hear the doubt in her responses. This wasn't something you could learn over the phone. It required practice, support, someone to help you through the worst moments. I called Dr. Chen Reeves. You had no right to give her my number.
I know. I'm sorry. But Marcus, she's getting worse. Fast. faster than any case I've documented. The familial connection seems to amplify the effect. If someone doesn't help her soon,
she'll go into the water like Tom did.
Yes.
I spent 3 days wrestling with the decision. Every rational part of my brain said to stay away. Going back to the Gulf would put me at risk. The name takers would sense me. The voice would get stronger. But I kept thinking about Tom, about how I'd found his gear arranged on the beach, about the note he'd left. Tell my sister I'm sorry. I called Diana back. I'm coming, but we're not staying in Biloxi. We're getting you inland, even if I have to drag you. I drove south through Texas, my anxiety increasing with every mile. By the time I crossed into Louisiana, I could hear my name again, clear and insistent. Marcus. Marcus Webb. It had been weeks since it had been this loud. Diana met me at a coffee shop in Biloxi, 5 blocks from the beach. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking, hair unwashed. She looked like Tom had in those last days in the chamber.
"Thank you for coming," she said. "I didn't think you would."
"We're leaving, right now. My truck's outside."
"I can't. I tried. I got to the county line and I had to turn back. It feels like there's a rope around my chest pulling me toward the water."
"You're going to feel that. You have to push through it." We got in my truck and headed north. Diana lasted 15 minutes before she started hyperventilating.
I can't. It hurts. Please turn around."
"Focus on your breathing. Look at me, not the road. You're Diana Cassidy. You're 26 years old. You're a graphic designer. You have a cat named Pixel. You're more than just a name."
"It knows everything about me. It's in my head, Marcus. It knows my childhood memories, my fears, everything."
Because of Tom. The name takers had consumed Tom, and through him, they'd learned about Diana. The familial connection went both ways. We made it 50 miles before Diana passed out from the pain. I kept driving. When she woke up an hour later, we were in Mississippi, 120 miles from the coast. She was crying.
"It's quieter," she said. "Oh, God, it's actually quieter."
We stopped at a motel in Jackson, Mississippi. I got 2 rooms and stayed up all night teaching Diana the techniques I'd learned. How to recognize the voice without responding to it. How to let it pass through. How to build mental walls. She was a quick study. By morning, she could go 10 minutes without reacting to the voice calling her name. By the second day, she was lasting an hour. By the end of the week, she'd achieved what had taken me a month.
"I think I can do this,"
she said on the 7th day.
"I think I can actually live with this."
You can, but you can never go back to the coast. You understand that?
"I know."
She looked at me with haunted eyes.
"Marcus, is Tom really gone? Or is he down there somewhere, like you said, collected?"
I thought about everything I'd learned, about the divers who'd been taken over the years, about the figure I'd seen in the footage holding that slate with its message. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But if he is down there, he's not Tom anymore. He's something else, part of something larger." Diana nodded slowly. "I dreamed about him last night. He was underwater, but he could breathe. He looked peaceful. And there were others with him, dozens of them. They were all together, moving as one. He looked at me and said, 'Don't come here. You're free. Stay free.'" I felt a chill run down my spine. That wasn't just a dream. I know. I left Diana in Jackson with contacts for Dr. Chin Reeves, a therapist who specialized in maritime trauma, and enough money to get her started in a new life away from the Gulf. Then I drove back to Colorado, fighting the pull of the water every mile of the way. The voice was stronger now, louder. Going back to the Gulf had reinforced the connection. I spent weeks rebuilding my mental defenses, relearning how to let the sound pass through me without acknowledgement. But something had changed. I'd helped Diana, and in doing so, I'd proven something important. The name takers could be resisted. Their hold could be broken. You couldn't escape completely. Once they knew you, they always knew you. But you could choose not to answer. You could stay free. I've been in Colorado for 6 more months since then. I still hear my name. Probably will for the rest of my life. But it's manageable now. Background noise. Like tinnitus you learn to ignore. I'm telling you this story because you need to know. If you work in the deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico, if you're a commercial diver or an offshore worker, you need to understand what's down there. There are things in the deep places, ancient things, things that were here long before us and will be here long after we're gone. The oil companies won't tell you. They've suppressed the information for decades because the truth would shut down billions of dollars in operations. But the Perdido deep site is still active. So are the other sites where name takers congregate. And they're still claiming people. If you're reading this and you're scheduled to work at any deep water site in the Gulf, especially if it's in areas where there have been unexplained disappearances or psychological incidents, please, please be careful. Follow these rules. Don't speak your name while underwater. Use call signs or numbers. Don't stay at depth longer than necessary. If you hear anything that sounds like your name, don't acknowledge it. If you see symbols scratched into equipment or structures, especially the named mark I've described, report it and get to the surface immediately. If you start hearing your name after a dive, get away from the coast, as far inland as you can go, and learn to not answer. The name takers can call you, but they can't force you to come home. That choice is yours. I don't dive anymore. I probably never will again. Sometimes I miss it, the silence, the weightlessness, the sense of being in another world. But I'm alive, I'm free, and I choose to stay that way. If you've made it this far, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Make sure other divers know what they're getting into. The companies won't protect you. The government won't acknowledge the truth. But we can protect each other. And if you're from the Gulf Coast, if you work the deep waters or know someone who does, drop a comment. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me you've heard the stories too. Tell me I'm not alone in knowing what's really down there. Because the worst part of all this, I know there are more sites, more name-taker territories throughout the world's oceans. The Gulf of Mexico is just one location. And as we push deeper into the oceans, drilling and mining and exploring places we were never meant to go, we're going to encounter more of them. They're patient, they're eternal, and they're collecting. Don't let them collect you. It's been 2 years since the Perdido Deep site. I'm writing this final update from a small cabin outside of Denver. I've built a good life here, welding work, a few friends who don't ask too many questions, a therapist who specializes in PTSD. I tell her it's from my Navy days, which isn't entirely untrue. The voice is always there. Quieter now, barely a whisper most days, but it never truly goes away. I've learned to live with it the way you learn to live with chronic pain. Some days are worse than others. When it rains, especially during storms, the voice gets louder. I've learned to stay inside during those times, to focus on the mental exercises that keep me from acknowledging the call. Diana checks in with me every few weeks. She moved to Oklahoma City, started a new life. She's doing well, considering. She told me last month that she met someone, a man who doesn't know about her brother or the Gulf or any of it. I'm happy for her. She deserves peace. Dr. Chin Reeves passed away 3 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. But before she died, she sent me all of her research. 35 years of documentation. She included a note. Continue the work. People need to know. I've been compiling everything. Her research, my experiences, the accounts I've gathered from other divers who've encountered the name takers and survived. I'm putting together a comprehensive database, something that can't be suppressed or hidden away by corporate interests. It's slow work and dangerous. 2 weeks ago, I received a visit from a lawyer representing Helix Energy and 3 other Gulf drilling companies. He strongly suggested I stop talking about the Perdido Deep site. Mentioned defamation, loss of business, legal consequences. I showed him the door. They can threaten all they want. I'm not stopping. Because every week I get emails from divers and offshore workers who've experienced something they can't explain, who hear their names in the water, who dream of going back to the deep. I try to help each one. Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes I'm too late. Last week, I got an email from a saturation diver working in the North Sea. He described symbols carved into offshore equipment, hearing his name in the water, the same pattern I experienced. The name takers aren't limited to the Gulf of Mexico. They're everywhere humans venture into the deep ocean. We're waking something up, something that's been dormant in the deepest parts of the ocean for millions of years. And it's starting to notice us. I still wonder about Tom sometimes, about all the divers who've been taken. Are they truly gone, or are they preserved down there, part of something we can't comprehend? In my darkest moments, I wonder if they're better off, freed from fear and doubt, integrated into an eternal consciousness that exists beyond human understanding. But then I look out my window at the mountains, breathe the thin Colorado air, feel the sun on my face, and I know I made the right choice. I chose to stay human, to stay myself, to refuse the call, no matter how seductive it might be. That choice is available to everyone who's been marked. The name takers are powerful, but they're not omnipotent. They can only claim those who answer. So don't answer. And whatever you do, don't go back. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a former deep-sea welder, and I'm still free. If you've experienced anything similar, if you work in deep water and something knows your name, reach out. You're not alone, and you don't have to answer the call. Stay safe, stay inland, and remember, they only have what you give them.